Rani Allan. I'm the Refugee Program intern with the Unitarian Universalist Association, UN office. I'm originally half Palestinian, half Lebanese, coming from the Arab region with a family that migrated here. Some of them were refugees. So I'm a first generation boy here in the US. Now, 65.6 people were forcibly displaced in 2016. However, only 189,000 resettled. 17.2 individuals were registered as refugees with the Office of the High Commissioner for Refugees in 2016. That's 17.2 million. And the United States admitted only 97,000 in that same year. But in 2017, that number dropped drastically to 28,000. The percentage of the resettled refugees in the United States based on the world's refugee population dropped to only 0.2% compared to the country's historic average of 0.6%. The past year has also witnessed dangerous policies to the refugee and migrant communities of the United States and the world. Trump rescinded the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals policy, thus affecting over 800,000 undocumented migrants. Trump also issued his long-promised Muslim ban, often called the travel ban, specifically targeting countries with the highest refugee populations, like Syria, Somalia, and Iran. Those in the United States with family and friends from the 8 banned countries can no longer see their loved ones, and those who were not fortunate to seek asylum earlier are pushed to vulnerability as they are stateless. But it's not easy for those who have already resettled either. Hate crimes against Muslims and Arabs have rose significantly. The United States consistently detains asylum seekers on the border and within its land, and places them in detention facilities managed by the private prison sector. The asylum seekers and migrants are often expelled, sometimes physically or sexually abused. Just this week, the Southern Poverty Law Center reported that federal agencies lost track of nearly 1,500 migrant children. Immigrant communities of color have been feeling unsafe. But today, all of us, migrants and refugees, come here to affirm our dignity. We come here to listen to each other, and we come here to support the refugee and migrant rights movement. Now, I'd like to turn to our guests now, and first, I'd like each speaker to give an introduction of themselves and the work that they do. We'll go from left to right. Edafe, Somia, Pauline, then Henia. We'll start with you, Edafe.
The work I do is very extensive, but I'm just going to give a brief explanation of the work I do. I am a refugee and migrant advocate. I am now the director of RODG Refugee Shelter in Allen. We provide housing for asylum seekers and asylees who have been granted asylum. I am a board member of First Friends of New Jersey and New York, which provide support to asylum seekers who are detained in detention centers. I'm the author of Bed 26, Memoir of an African Man Asylum. And recently I started a podcast with NPR Radio, which has been voted as the 10 most popular asylum podcasts in the entire states. So I do work surrounding advocacy for immigrants community in New Jersey. We're currently working on a bill that will enable immigrants to have ID without verifying their immigration status. Let me stop there for now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Somia Elrowmeim. I am Adult Education and Women Empowerment Program Manager at the Arab American Association of New York. I work also with This organization, it's Latino and Asian community organization, and they're like adult education specialist and advisor. I came to United States of America in 2007. I'm actually from Yemen. I'm a migrant, and I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of my family, and I work for the immigrant who just came to United States, especially the new immigrant. I always like support the new immigrant who came to United States of America recently, and I help them out to do support them, like to do like their immigrant paper, or sometimes like they have some, like they want to learn English, or they want to know about their rights or the American system. This is like what I'm doing. I'm actually the founder of Union for Arab Women, and also I'm running a program. It's called AWL. It's Arab Women and Advocacy Leader. It's like to educate the women in the Arab community and to make them a leader in the community. And also for Union for Arab Women, it's like a program to educate the women to be organizer in the community. So they lead our community and they educate the community about their rights. Thank you.
Is it turned on? Oh, it's really on.
I think we need technical help.
There we go, that's better.
Thank you.
I'm Pauline Park. I was born in Korea, grew up in the Midwest, moved to New York in 1995. I've been doing LGBT activism and community organizing since 1994. I've been doing Palestine solidarity work since 2011. Participated in the first US LGBTQ delegation tour of Palestine in January 2012. I've co-founded a number of different organizations, including Niagara, New York Association for Gender Rights Advocacy. We led the campaign for the New York City transgender rights law that was enacted in 2002. And I've also co-founded Queens Pride House, which is the LGBT community center in the borough of Queens. I'm currently president of the board of directors. I was executive director from May 2012 to July 2015, and continue to serve as the coordinator of the transgender support group. Let's see what else. I'll just mention one or two other things in terms of Palestine work. I co-founded a group called New York City Queers Against Israeli Apartheid, which is the only LGBT-specific group in the city that's working to end the illegal Israeli occupation of Palestine. And let's see, what else can I tell you? I do a lot of writing and speaking, and I'm really delighted to be here with you all. Thanks so much, Rani, for organizing this and inviting me.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Henia Dakkak. I work with the United Nations Population Fund. I'm here since, I came to New York in 2000. And my background is I'm a medical doctor, and I have a master's degree in public health, and I have done some postdoctorate research scholar at Columbia University. So I came as a Fulbright scholar, and that situation in Palestine changed, and immediately, it was not easy for me to go back at that time. So I stayed here, and then, the United Nations and other international organizations started asking for my help to help them because of the background and the work that I did before coming to the United States. I worked on many humanitarian situations. So I was in refugee camps, I was in many disasters around the world, I was in Kosovo during the Kosovo crisis, so I was in the Balkans, Middle East, Africa, so basically I was the one that they were looking for, so I just was lucky at that time to be where I was at that time. But currently my work is really about supporting the organization to to work in the humanitarian settings. We have 120 country offices around the world as United Nations Population Fund, and we are, part of our mandate is really to support governments in their planning, censuses, basically having an understanding of the numbers that they are dealing with. Because many countries, when they were liberated from colonization, some of them, they didn't even know the numbers that they have in the country. What are the population size and so on and so forth. So we started as a population organization, but then we working as a United Nations. Of course, the main issue is human rights and making sure that human rights is central to the work that we do. So eventually all of this basically was based on reproductive health rights, sexual and reproductive health rights, because if people can exercise their rights, then without coercion, then they will be able to have the numbers and the life that they want for themselves and for their children, and then that it is free from any coercive or with good information and good services, because definitely in order for you to be able to plan better, I come from a family that has 8 children. If we were 4, it would have been different. Most probably all my brothers and sisters were being able to go to universities. Of course, you know, it ended up, some of us went to the university, some didn't. So I'm just saying from my own personal experience as a person who grew up in a big family, there is pluses and minuses to big family. There is good things for good families, but also there are minuses when you are stretched with resources and not able to really meet that basic demands of the family. So I ended up supporting the organization to build their humanitarian work, wherever they are, because in many places we are either in the emergency, during the emergency, or before the emergency and after the emergency situation. So all my work is related to refugees, IDPs, migrants, and humanitarian people that need humanitarian assistance. Over to you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much to all of our speakers. Now turn over the mic again to Edafe. Edafe, could you tell us about your experience coming to the United States and the hardships you faced?
So, I came to the US October 2016, few days to the presidential election, and the United States was filled with a lot of tension of what would be the outcome for the country as a whole. But I don't care about the outcome of the country at that point because I care about being safe. So I was working in Nigeria as a human rights activist for LGBTIQ persons because my country enacted a law on January 7, 2014 that criminalizes same-sex by 14 years imprisonment. And organizations who provide services for LGBTIQ persons are also persecuted by 10 years imprisonment. Unluckily for me, I was working in the first human rights organization in Nigeria that advocate for same-sex persons to have access to healthcare services. So my organization was facing constant attack from government, the police, and mob violence. But I still continue living in Nigeria because my life was not in that terrible position for me to live. But in July 2016, when I returned from the World AIDS Conference, I was attacked in my apartment. I was brought out, beaten. I blacked out. So when I woke up, I found myself in a clinic, and the nurse told me that I was brought here by a lady who saw an ID on me, and the ID is the clinic where I was working, so she brought me there. So I had to leave my country because I was living in a Muslim-dominated community. The attack I suffered has put my life in a threatening position, so I traveled to the UAE I stayed in the UAE, but I could not seek asylum because they did not sign the 1951 Refugee Convention document. So I returned back to my country, and I was staying in hiding. I lost my job and every other thing. But I didn't want to leave my country because I don't know where else to go. But in October 2016, I won an award, and my names and photograph were published as an award-winning LGBTQ rights activist. So this time, my pictures were pasted in the community saying that I've been found advocating against their religious views and the laws of their land. If I'm found, I should be brought down dead or alive. So I had a US visa because I was supposed to come to the award ceremony, but I didn't come to the award ceremony because I knew the threats that it posed to my staying in Nigeria. But the deed has been done, so I had to leave. So I traveled to Egypt. While I was in Cairo, I was already displaced from my country. I had to go somewhere. I had a European visa and I had a US visa. Well, I thought about the challenge of seeking asylum in Europe, language barrier, and Italy and so many other countries in Europe are already complaining about the Syrian refugees. So I had knowledge about where I could seek asylum, and I believe in the justice system of the US, and I could speak English to some extent, so I said, okay, let me come to the US. So I crossed the border. When I crossed the border, I had a 2 years US visitor's visa, so I was asked to go in, but I have no place to go, no friends or family. So I went back to the border patrol officer and told the border patrol officer that I'm an asylum seeker. I'm leaving my country because of the persecution I faced in my country. The response I got from the border patrol officer was that I was going to be taken to a jail. I was like, it was very difficult for me to resound what I just heard, that I'm fleeing persecution from my country and you're taking me to a jail. That was even okay because there was no place to house me. But the most difficult part was being on handcuff, being thrown in a bus, and I found myself at the Elizabeth Detention Center. It was very difficult to stay in one particular place, but I had no option because I can't return back to my country because of the persecution I'm likely to face. Although I was detained in the US, at the end I was granted asylum because I could document it. But there are so many people like myself who stayed in the detention center for 3 years, 2.5 years, and they are not granted asylum, and they are subsequently returned back to their country because the immigration system is bigotry, like it's predatory. It tried to beat you. Some people who cannot even speak English, they are given documents to sign, and that document leads to their deportation. And other folks who are not well grounded and they don't have access to the internet to get documents from their country, they can't prove their case. Like, the immigration system is now predatory, and it's like pushing people who are fleeing persecution diligently from their country. They are not able to seek safety. So being in a detention center is like using taxpayers' money to house people in a particular place, making private prisons to make more profit out of housing me for $157 a day for 6 months. It's like $37,000 US. I feel like there are better systems in which, I know it's not like I feel like, there are better systems in which the government can use to house asylum seekers. Like in Canada, there are temporary housing and transitional housing in which asylum seekers who have genuinely proved that their lives are in danger are being housed. In UK, the detention system, you can't stay in a detention center for more than 72 hours before you're transferred into a temporary housing. So it was very difficult for me to go through that process as an asylum seeker. The mental state I'm being put through is very difficult. I believe that it all happened for a reason, and that is the reason why I'm being able to speak on behalf of other people who are also going through the process right now, that there should be an oversight system who who will look into the immigration that is not of the current immigration system, because I feel like the system is currently fucked up and is treating people in such a way that is very, very harsh to the institution that this country was and the values in which this country was built upon.
Thank you, Edafe. Somia, while working with you at the Arab-American Association of New York, we saw a lot of people in need of social and economic services, as well as facing hardships due to discrimination. Now, I'd like to ask you, as a leader in the Yemeni, Arab, Muslim, and immigrant community, could you speak about the kind of hardships you have witnessed in the resettlement process for refugees and migrants coming to the United States? This applies to finding jobs, housing, community, and other human rights.
Actually, refugee and new immigrant, when they arrive to the United States of America, the most important thing that they are seeking to find a safe place first. Especially most of the people who come to the United States of America are like now from Yemen, Syria, and like some country that like just they put it in the Muslim land. Those people, they are looking for safe place and they are looking for better life, better quality life. When they arrive to the United States of America, they dream about new life. So when they arrived here, they find out there is like something else. They face a lot of problems. They try to find a job. It's really difficult for them to find a job because of the language barrier first. So if you don't speak the language, you can't find a job, basically. So they have to be able to support themselves at least for 1 year until they find a good job, until they learn some language. And this is really, really big issue in our community. When they arrive, they come to Arab American Association and they ask, is there any job we can do? Anything. Do you know like how they feel like when you see like a person who was a judge in his country or who was a doctor, dentist, and come to the association to seek like a job, even he can do like even clean up the office. Any job. Why? He can't offer to rent a house for his family. He can't offer to buy food for his family. And he's still green card holder. Even he can't apply for any kind of service. And this is what our community like faced. And it's really, really that hurts us. When we see these people and those women, I had a woman who she was one of Union of Arab women, and she was a judge in her country. And she was looking for a job, like 24 hours a day. Like she was looking for a job. I need a job. I can't offer the rent. Rent is very expensive. This is one of the issues that our community faced. And the other issues, it's even if you have the language, we face the discrimination. Many people are racist. When they're gonna see a woman who's wearing hijab, they're not gonna hire her, even if she has master's degree, even if she has PhD. But because they say like, oh, you are a person of color and you are Muslim, and you're not allowed even maybe to come over to this office. But like they're not gonna say it in your face, but like they're gonna find excuses to not interview or not hire you. This is part of the other issues that our community faced. And also, because like our association is based in Beirut, and Beirut is like, has different community there. Like there is Asian community, there is Arab community, and also there is Italian community over there. It's really big. And those people, they own a lot, they own most of the houses over there. And they don't like to rent it for Arab. So if you try to find apartment, even if you are willing to pay the rent, they're not gonna rent it for you, because basically you are Arab. This is also part of the issues that we are faced. Also, like in some schools in New York, they don't offer interpreter for the parents. And this is big, big problem for us when the parents go to school and they try to find out what their kids are doing there and what's the issues that their kids face. But like they didn't find someone to help them out. If you didn't speak the language, we are sorry. Try to find someone else to come with you and interpret it for you. And the system in the United States, especially in New York, has changed a lot. And now many schools, they offer interpreter in the school. But like some schools, people who's like running the school, some of them are racist and they just they don't want to bother themselves. It's not only for Arab, it's like for people of color, even Latino or Asian. This is what's happening in our community now. And one of the cases that I received, that one woman, she came to me, the ACS came to her house and they start doing investigation because her son, he fell down in the park and they thought that she hit her son. And actually she's Yemeni. And when they tried in school to bring someone to interpret for this kid, because he just came from Yemen, he can't speak the language. And he's trying to say oh, my mom talked me to the park and I fell down there. And the person who interpreted this is sent the message in different way. They said oh, his mom pushed him in the park. So this is the barrier that we face, because even the Arabic dialogue, it's different from country to other country. Sometimes one word is gonna make the sentence, it's completely upside down. And this is we have to be aware of that. Our people, they came from different culture, different background, different experience. We have to respect our people. We have to educate people. That's what I'm saying, because the system in the United States of America is different, and many people, they are not aware of that. So we have to find out another programs to educate our people about the system in the United States of America. And also, it's not only the people who just came to the United States of America, we need to educate the people who's here and about the issues and background that the people face, and what kind of problems that they have from their country, and how this is the smallest things that I would mention, the dialogue from country to country, even if they speak Arabic, it's completely different. One word can change the sentence. And this is what is the trauma that our community faces. This is actually some things or issues that we face.
Thank you, Somia. Now, I'd like to ask you, Pauline, I read your biography and you mentioned that you were adopted as a Korean by a German-American mother and a Norwegian-American father in Wisconsin. Could you tell us how it felt like to be a Korean in a white family? To what extent did you face hardships, if any?
So, I was born in Korea and was adopted at the age of 7.5 months out of an orphanage in Seoul. Although this is something of a coincidence and didn't have directly to do with my adoption, I was adopted at the time of the coup that brought Park Chung-hee to power. Some of you might know that his daughter is now in prison and has been sentenced to 24 years, which is what she deserves. But Park Chung-hee industrialized the country, and when I left Korea, it was still one of the poorest countries on earth, and now it's the 11th largest economy in the world. But growing up on the south side of Milwaukee was really interesting in all sorts of ways, because at the time it was all white. Milwaukee, a lot of people think about Boston when they think about segregated schools, but Milwaukee and Chicago actually have the most segregated school systems in the country. And there wasn't desegregation until I was in high school, actually, court-ordered desegregation. And so my family, well, the entire neighborhood was all white. It's funny because I went back several years ago and discovered that the house next door is now owned by an African-American, which would have been unimaginable when I was growing up. And the corner convenience store that we used to go to is now run by someone of Arab descent, an Arab immigrant, which also would have been inconceivable when I was growing up. So now it's a little bit more diverse, which is great. And I now actually live in Jackson Heights, which is the most diverse neighborhood in Queens, the most diverse county in the United States. And actually, a demographer recently determined that Jackson Heights is the most diverse neighborhood on earth, demographically. But growing up, I mean, it was a challenge because other than a handful of other Korean adoptees, it was an incredibly white environment, and there was very little consciousness about diversity. And growing up in the 60s and the 70s, there was a very strong assimilationist discourse that was dominant. That eventually changed for the better, but there was really very little in the way of support, consciousness, understanding. It would have been great to be able to study Korean, but there was no such opportunity back then. So I grew up in an all-white household. My father was actually the son of immigrants. His parents immigrated from Norway, and my mother was the granddaughter of immigrants. Her four grandparents immigrated from Prussia, the part of Prussia that's now in Poland. But it took really a while to come to terms with the challenges of being a person of color in an all-white school, in an all-white neighborhood. There were incidents, no matter how much I might think of myself as being American, having never actually been back to Korea, there were always people eager to remind me that I was different. So, for example, every December I would dread Pearl Harbor Day because kids would chant slogans and shout things and even throw firecrackers and stuff like that. And it, kind of ironic, given that I was Korean adoptee and they were talking about the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor. Doubly ironic because at the time Korea was under Japanese military occupation. But unfortunately, back then, and it's also true of a lot of Americans today, have very little political consciousness or grasp of history, even our own American history. So I think it was a challenge, but it also made me realize how important it was to think in terms of not only diversity, but the pursuit of social justice and the creation of a world in which people can grow up regardless of their background or how they're perceived and flourish and have access to education and healthcare and everything else that everyone else should have full access to.
Great, thank you, Pauline. Henia, we're happy to have you tonight. As you know, the past few years have witnessed an increased hardship in resettling refugees. Could you tell us how the United Nations has been handling the challenges with the rising number of refugees?
Okay, tough question. I think it's really not an easy question. Globally, we are seeing an increase in the numbers of people who are refugees, who are internally displaced, and who are stateless. And I can give you an example, the Henia situation now, where these people are considered stateless. They don't have a state, nobody wants to recognize them. Myanmar doesn't want to recognize them. Bangladesh doesn't want to recognize them. So they are stateless. They have no papers, basically. So that situation is on the rise. Currently, globally, we have 134 million people who need assistance globally. So this is the number that is require at least $22 billion in order to be able to assist them. And this number, if we continue with the climate change problems that we are seeing currently, the numbers are going to increase more because we are seeing also global displacement because of the climate change. For example, a lot of the islands, a lot of people don't even recognize that some of the islands are disappearing. And the people who are living there cannot actually live there anymore. So they have to find another solution. They have to find another place to live. So unless we definitely work on thinking about how do we address these issues at the global scale with all the governments, because you cannot do this just saying, okay, the refugees themselves, the IDPs themselves, trying to fend for themselves. No, we have to bring everybody to account to do something about this. So it's not only the UN that has to do something, it's also the governments, the member states. A lot of the governments have signed on the Refugee Convention. They need to resettle. You said it in the beginning, like the US is one of the countries that have signed the Refugee Convention and actually is one of the countries that still resettle refugees. Currently, we have seen Germany, who basically was not resettling that many refugees before, is settling more refugees, as Syrian refugees, than the United States, which is really ironic. You know, like it's something that we are seeing a different scale. We never saw migrants, you know, crossing the Mediterranean, risking their life just in order to get to somewhere better. At least, you know, even if they know that they are not going to survive maybe that trip, they are still risking it. Because the other option is to remain where they are. Most probably they are not finding jobs, they are not finding enough food to eat, they are not being able to educate their children, they want better future. And I don't think any one of us can argue that. Everyone who has a child, who is currently like a teenager wants a better life. Globally, currently, people who stay in this type of a limbo in their life, you know, like they are in a refugee situation or displacement situation, average 20 years almost. Before it was almost 17, now it's averaging 20 years. Because with the recent Syrian crisis, we are not seeing any hope in the coming even few months. And we already have seen this from 2012. We are now 2018. We are in the middle of 2018. There is no even a slight hope at the moment to see some sort of a resolution coming. So we are going to see people remaining in this type of a limbo and situation. The numbers, for example, we have seen countries like Turkey absorbing 1 million Syrian refugees, even 2 million, up to 2 million. Lebanon is 1 million refugees in Lebanon currently, and because they are doing election now, so the numbers are very important for them. And then in Jordan, it's 500,000 and above 500,000 of Syrian refugees, plus you have the Palestinian refugees who are there from before. So you are, and then the Iraqi refugees who basically came during the Iraq war to Jordan to at least to have a little bit of safety and security. So the situation is becoming unhelpful even for the governments that is also open to receiving refugees if they don't get support. And that's what the UN is trying to do, is now to support the governments to start really working on new frameworks, especially after the New York Declaration. If you have seen the New York Declaration 2016, where a lot of us have worked to make sure that issues related to refugees and migration is something that everybody has to do something about it. So there are new frameworks of how to really resettle, do long-lasting solutions, because we cannot continue saying there is no durable solution, there is no solution. People have to go back. It's very difficult after living 17, 20 years in wherever you are. Do you think it's easy to even return back to some, even if you want, even if you like your country of origin, okay, your life had changed already. And the mental health issues of this population is not going to go away just because we resettle them or we return them back to where they are. I can give you a lot of examples. Uganda now has more than 2 million refugees in Uganda. So it's like, okay, because of DRC, because of Burundi, because of South Sudan. So we are not seeing just everybody's trying to come to the United States. No, a lot of people, a lot of more refugees and IDPs around the world are not in the United States. Okay? And this whole issue is like, oh, they want to take advantage of like the community here. No, and that's what exactly like a lot of people are trying to do, work on the laws that are in these countries to say this is not like the United States is not really getting the most numbers. They are getting really like the least numbers, and it's getting worse and worse because politically the situation in the United States now is not conducive. My organization, we were defunded. The first thing they did, you know, like the moment the administration came, they defunded the organization. And it's defunding what? You know, women receiving life-saving intervention, saving a woman from dying in childbirth. So basically we are promoting more women dying in childbirth instead of really preventing women dying in childbirth. So these are the things that we are dealing with. We are working on gender-based violence, which is like sexual violence. We have seen like hundreds of women in the Rohingya situation have been raped. Now, most of them have got pregnant. There is a whole number of children who have been born who don't look like the Rohingya anymore, who look differently because they were, you know, raped by the army and the different groups. And now we have to face another type of situation where you have a lot of children who nobody wants anymore. Not the women themselves, not like, so there is another bigger problems that occurs. These women will have these children, what are we going to do with these children? So there are a lot of big problems currently. And sexual violence is one of the many problems that we are seeing, but it's everything. It's water, it's sanitation, it's resources, it's shelter, it's protection, it's education. What about the education? What about these generation of children who are not getting the opportunity to have education? So imagine what will be happening to these children and what will be the future and what type of, if we are really about fighting terrorism, if we are about really making changes in this world, we really need to do something about all of these issues, and we cannot continue saying this is not my problem and this is not my issue and I should look the other way. Thank you.
Thank you, Henia. Edafe, I'll turn back to you. In your recently published book, Bed 26, which by the way is available over there, you talk about how you reclaimed your freedom once you resettled in the United States. What conditions do you think allowed you to gain this power and freedom, and how were you able to do so after such a traumatic experience?
Having a law on paper is a step in the right direction. United States, on June 26, 2015, some states passed the same-sex marriage act that allowed same-sex couples to be able to marry in the US. The law also gave rights to LGBTQ asylum seekers to be able to seek protection under membership of a particular social group. So I feel like having that law on paper was a step in the right direction for the country. For myself, I feel lucky because when I came into this country, was homeless practically. I was staying in a shelter. But a year after I stayed in a shelter, I can't really say things I have done because it's numerous, but I would say that the support I got from people who are very compassionate about refugees is awesome. So, like on media, we hear about how the current administration is trying to bully immigrants, but we don't hear about what people who live in this country do day to day to make sure that immigrants are striving in the society. Non-profit organizations who provide social services, like as Somia mentioned, people face discrimination based on their accent, their spoken language, and so many other things. Although I'm advantaged that I had a degree in my country before I came to the US, but those do not count. I believe that there are hardworking Americans who are very compassionate and want to see the world to become a better place. And they act undermining the buzz in the media and so many other things. So I appreciate people who are working or providing steps in any way they can to make sure that people resettle and don't worry about what is happening in the media, because I feel like it's distraction towards the good work that is currently happening. So the stepping stone for me to be able to resettle in this country was the non-profits that provided support such as transitional housing, resume development, cultural appropriation, temporary refugee resettlement. At the beginning, those, like the first 8 weeks, those were how I was able to sustain into transitioning and becoming a part of this country. But now today, I know how hard I work to make sure that I provide a voice for asylum seekers and refugees, but not to counteract or be politically blind, and because I support a particular political party or I'm against a particular political party, it blinds my sense of judgment and I only react based on what I perceive. I will urge people to continue to do the good work they do, because we no longer celebrate the little wins that we win, and we concentrate on the political statue that is there. And that fight is a vain fight, because we have been in the government for 1 year and 8 months and nothing has been happening. And do you think that within a twinkle of an eye something is going to happen that will change erratically or dramatically the situation of the country? In 4 years, this government will go and another government will come. But if we concentrate on fighting the administration the entire 4 years, we forget the work that we're supposed to do. And the work that we're supposed to do is to volunteer our time for non-profits or help to educate people. Or if you know how to speak 2 languages, you can teach English as a second language, cultural appropriation, educate people with social media, and don't waste your time fighting on social media, vain fights. If you could take that time that you used to post against this current administration to write about a story of a refugee that migrated from one country to the US and is able to resettle, it will motivate other people to see the humanity in the work that they are doing. I believe that that was why I was able to resettle in this country, because people saw humanity and they don't see if I was black, if I was gay, if I had an accent, if I was a refugee. People did not see those layers of trauma I came with. They saw the fact that I was a human being that they could connect with, and they wanted to support a human being. And I feel like, for me, that is the win that we should think about always.
Thank you, Edafe. Somia, now I'll turn back to you. As we both know, Trump's Muslim ban has caused a lot of anxiety and concerns within the Arab community. Could you describe how our community is feeling right now and how Trump's presidency has exacerbated the hardships we already faced?
Actually, our community have been through a lot of trauma, as I said before. is not from Trump time. It actually started from Obama time. Because Obama, first of all, he supported the Saudi Arabia military against one of the countries, like against Yemen. And as you know, like we have a lot of immigrants who's Yemeni, who really hard worker. And you heard about bodega strike. It's like was really big. Because like they refuse like what's going on in Middle East. And the reality, like there are some people who's from Yemen. This is like maybe nobody know about it. Some people from Yemen elected Trump because they heard him what he said about Saudi Arabia. And they were like really tired of Saudi Arabia. They want to run all the Middle East as they want, as the way they want. Actually, after what's happening and how Trump changed everything, and he's running after money, and this was like expecting from him before I know that he's gonna do that. Actually, many Yemenis people and Syrian, this is the people who's really were in the, like they are in the black list, in the Muslim ban list, and other people from Libya, Iran, and other countries. But most of the people who's affected from the Muslim ban, it's like Yemeni and Syrian people. Those people, especially like because I'm from Yemen and I'm like really in touch with the Yemeni people and what's happening with them. Many people they are stuck in Djibouti and in Malaysia. They sold everything that they have in Yemen after they got like the message from the embassy from Djibouti or Malaysia that they have interview, and they are ready like to get the visa. And at the end, they got the visa and they denied it at the same time after the Muslim ban. Do you know like how they feel? Those people, they have been waiting for this visa for more than 2 or 3 years to get it, and at the same time when they're gonna get it, just they're gonna deny it? Like, where is it? Like, how would they do that? This is like against the constitution. That's never happened before. People like some like people who I know is like they have been in Djibouti for more than 2 years waiting for this visa, or 1 year and a half. And one of the women, she born there, she born a baby, a new baby. And she received her visa, but like her baby stuck there. They said, oh, we are sorry, we can't give you a baby visa. And she has to wait like 6 months to get her baby visa, but like her visa is gonna be expired. So she has to leave her baby to come to United States of America because her visa is gonna be expired. And she left her baby over there with her husband who's American citizen. And he was like crying over there, like he doesn't know what he has to do. This is what's happening there. That's why our community is like really under a lot of depression, trauma, and they are so tired they can't afford the life over there. As you know, like they are people of color, and the maximum they make like 40K, and like this 40K, like it's like barely make them survive in the United States of America. They can't open another house in different country. And this is what's happening now. Many people, they sold everything they have. Like they have this hope to get their family here. This ban, it's separated family. It's impact a lot of people. People of color, like especially Yemenis, they are hard workers. They work 12 hours a day. And at the end, they can't even bring their family. Some of them, they didn't know even Yemen. They didn't know. They left, they born here and they raised here, and they didn't know their the country Yemen, and they just they put them in the ban, in Muslim ban. Why? Like this is our home. We don't have another home. Why you ban my son? Why you ban my wife? This is what's happening now. Yeah.
Thank you, Somia. Pauline, LGBT refugees like Edafe who seek asylum in the United States get detained on the border. Could you speak about the role identity plays in contributing to such detentions, deportations, and even criminalizations?
So I'll tell you a story. 5 or 6 years ago, a gay friend of mine who was actually writing a play about a young transgendered woman from Guyana asked me to speak with her, and I did. She was actually in detention, in a detention facility. You probably know about that, Jeffrey Solomon's play. And she was in a detention facility in New Jersey. She came from Guyana, which sadly is one of the most homophobic and transphobic countries on earth, I think, along with Jamaica and Nigeria, Uganda. You could go down the list, but anyway, she didn't feel that she could be openly transgender in Guyana. It's quite risky to be openly LGBT there. So she just decided to get on a plane and fly to New York. So she arrives at JFK, and she has no visa, no nothing, so they immediately lock her up, throw her in the detention facility in New Jersey. Well, because her ID is male, right? She has legal sex designation as male, they put her in the men's prison. But she's extremely feminine, slight, has long hair, and looks extremely feminine. And so it's pretty risky in a detention facility or a prison, which is basically what these detention facilities are. So because a number of men in the detention facility, the men's detention facility, wanted to get to know her better, to put it euphemistically, they put her in solitary confinement, which is in effect punishing her for being, transgender, for being different, right? And fortunately, she got help from Immigration Equality, some really good people there, Victoria Nielsen and others, and they were able to spring her. Jeff Solomon finished his play. I actually got to meet her after she got out of detention. And she found a job working as a hairstylist. And so she's now happily settled here in the city. But this is an example of where the nexus between sexual orientation, gender identity, and immigration status becomes very real, because it's often difficult to prove a well-founded fear of persecution, even if you have that. And immigration, ICE is not nice. And a lot of LGBT people lack the ability to document what they've been through in their home countries, even if they are actually being threatened in their own home countries or have suffered assault or other kinds of oppression. I'll tell you another story. In 1997, I co-founded a small group called Iban Queer Koreans of New York, which was the first organization vying for LGBT Koreans here in New York. It included a lot of recent Korean immigrants, also Korean-Americans, some Korean adoptees. And I served as coordinator and basically ran the group for 2.5 years. And so because we were listed in a directory of LGBT organizations, I would get calls, and one call was from a Korean immigrant who had just come that very week from Korea, and she was a dentist in Seoul, was a successful professional, but wanted to transition and realized that it would be extremely difficult, if not possible, to maintain her professional practice as a dentist. Because even though things are changing for the better in Korea, it's still a very homophobic and transphobic society, very, very Confucian patriarchal society. We should have a chat about your experience there. And so she gave me a call and said, I just came to New York. And her call wasn't so much about employment, it was really about social services. But the problem was, she did did not want to go to Korean social services because she rightly feared discrimination. And yet, there were really no culturally competent LGBT community-based social services. If I referred her to the LGBT Community Center here in Manhattan on West 13th Street, they had no one who spoke Korean or was culturally competent to deal with some of the issues that she was facing. So she was kind of, falling between two stools. And very often, when LGBT people come here, they find it very difficult to access social services, which are vitally important, as you were saying before. As I mentioned earlier, I'm the coordinator of the transgender support group at Queen's Pride House, and we have one member who is from Bangladesh. And Bangladesh is another society that is, rather homophobic and transphobic. This member was and is married, and actually it was his wife who suggested that he come here to the US because it would be more accepting if he decided to transition. But he's found it extremely difficult to find employment because he only has a very temporary visa and no legal basis to stay beyond, I think it's 6 months or something like that. And in any case, would like to transition, but finds himself or herself, even though she identifies as a woman, in a position where she's not really able to actualize her gender identity, her transgender identity, and finds it difficult to document her well-founded fear of persecution. And in fact, she messaged me over Facebook just 2 days ago and was talking about how, because she has a fatty liver, even though she started hormone replacement therapy, she's finding it very difficult, and in discussions with her doctor, she might actually end her hormone replacement therapy, but the thing is, that is what she feels will help document her transgender identity for immigration officials. And so I advised her, I suggested that she get a letter from her doctor attesting to the fact that she has this liver condition that may make it difficult for her to continue on hormones, but that but the fact that she started on hormones shows that she has a very strong intention to transition and to actualize her identity as a transgender woman. So these are the kinds of challenges that LGBT people face who are immigrants, refugees, migrants, who seek either political asylum here or some sort of, or green card or some sort of regularized immigration status. I have spoken with quite a few undocumented LGBT immigrants here. And they are more than anyone subjected to different forms of discrimination and oppression. Many transgendered women, this is, I think, particularly true of the transgendered Latinas I know in Queens, are either forced into sex work or feel compelled to do it because they can't find regular legal employment. And that makes them vulnerable to a whole range of different things. Obviously, HIV and STI transmission, but also police harassment. One of the trans Latinas who is from Mexico, is undocumented, was telling me that her experience at Queens Plaza, the area around Queens Plaza, Queensboro Plaza, there's a lot of sex work activity. Well, she told me that the police constantly harass the transgendered sex workers, but don't do anything about the non-transgendered sex workers. Well, that is discriminatory in an obvious sense, and yet because prostitution is illegal, it's not as if the transgendered sex workers could bring a complaint for discrimination. And so that's, I think, yet one more compelling argument for decriminalizing sex work. But these are some of the challenges that LGBT people, and particularly transgendered immigrants, face if and when they come here and seek either political asylum or some sort of regularized immigration status.
Pauline, Henia, you earlier mentioned the hardships women under war face. And given your honorable experience working for the empowerment of women, could you go more in depth about the intersection of women and displacement? How has the refugee crisis exacerbated the hardships of women and girls?
I think, like, it is well documented. For example, looking at the different vulnerabilities that you see in the refugees or IDP community, there are many. Okay, if you are a woman, you are vulnerable. If you are a child, you are vulnerable. It could be you are a woman, but you have a disability, you are more vulnerable. You could be a woman with, with a mental issue, you will become more vulnerable. There is a lot of vulnerability among the refugee and IDP communities anywhere among the population. So part of the work that we try to do in any situation like that is really to identify what are the vulnerability needs and then address them in the programs that we address, whether we establish a safe space for women and girls, whether we are working on an education program, we take that into consideration. But the reality of the matter, a lot of the time in this type of situation, a lot of the women find themselves in a new role that they didn't have before. So let us say a community, a woman in Yemen or a woman in Syria, most probably in her own community she was protected. She has a family, she has a social network, she knew where she's going, she has some sort of family support system. The moment you become a refugee or IDP, the moment you move out of your comfort zone, let us say, the challenges become massive. They are not one challenge, there are many challenges. A lot of the time, like what we have seen, for example, in Syria, a lot of the family, out of fear for their girls, actually force their girls to get married, at a younger age. So you have child marriage instead of, helping the girl go to school and be able to really. So that by itself actually exasperates the situation for a lot of teenage girls. In many places, we also found, working, for example, with refugees in Somalia, a lot of the girls actually were forced to go female genital mutilation. And they were forced to have that even before immigration, because their community wanted to make sure that they get that before they immigrate. So there are multiple issues, it's not one thing. Of course, when people were also crossing, even migrants who are crossing the Mediterranean, a lot of them we are finding more and more, it's not young boys or young men that basically are crossing the Mediterranean. It's whole families. It's a family with children, women, elderly with children, and I don't forget the picture in the newspaper when that little boy was found on the beach dead. These are realities. These are not, images of something that is happening somewhere. It's images of what the reality is. I was recently in Brindisi for a training for our colleagues. And while we were going from the hotel to the base where we are doing the training, there is a whole collective center where people who are asylum seekers are living. I can tell you, you cannot believe that is in Italy. It's worse than any refugee camp I have seen in my life. It's so bad. This is in Europe. This is not in anywhere. Actually, Zaatari camp in Jordan, is much better in quality of life than being in that collective center in Brindisi in Italy. This is the reality. It's stark reality of, and there are women within these centers. People, I don't remember, but if you could remember that sort of a makeshift camp that was in France before they crossed to, yeah, oh my God. There's women there, there is LGBT people, there is people from all over the world there, trying to cross on a daily basis, trying to find solution for their life. And I think as a woman, there are multiple things. There is rape, there is harassment, there is physical abuse, there is mental abuse, there is stigma, there is so many elements. There is language barriers, okay? Women were selling sex just to charge their phones. To charge your phone. Just to charge your phone, you are selling sex. Just to charge your phone so that you can call your family or get, support. So I think there are multiple vulnerabilities and intersection that needs to be looked at. It's not like, okay, we can design something one size fits all type of a program. It's always you have to look at that community and understand what they are going through and then find solutions for them. And I agree very much with all my colleagues who were talking about it. We need to really look beyond just the physical part and look at how they are coping, their coping mechanism. How can we support them to cope better? What type of information, what type of assistance we want to provide? How can we do that in a humane way and in a dignified way? Because the worst thing is for people to beg for support when we are seeing it in our eyes and we still look at the other side and say, okay, it's not my problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Henia. I was truly honored to have been part of this discussion. I'd now like to turn the mic over to my boss and Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalist UN office, Mr. Bruce Knotts. Mr. Bruce has worked in the field of international relations for decades, and he'd like to give the last and closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Really wonderful panel. All of you are my friends, except for Somia. I don't know you, but you're going to be a friend. So thank you so much for coming. Thank you all for coming. I don't know what arguments I can give. I actually teach a course at NYU on refugees and migrations. There's a humanitarian argument. I mean, if you have any kind of heart or soul, it has to go out to these people. And we have all of our scriptures say, welcome the stranger and help people in these kinds of conditions. You can talk about enlightened self-interest. Refugees and migrants bring value to the countries where they settle. I always love to tell the story that Steve Jobs' biological father was a Syrian refugee and lived here in New York, and if we hadn't welcomed him, we wouldn't have Apple computers and my iPhone and everything else. Syrians actually, per capita, have a higher level of education than Americans. So when taking in Syrian refugees, and refugees from many countries, we're taking in the best. And the ones that get here, Trump talks a lot about extreme vetting. First of all, we vet refugees very extremely. It does take 3 or 4 years just to get a visa, and then to get your visa and then tell them you can't come is just cruel and unusual punishment. But we get the best. The vetting is very kind of skewed so that we're not taking the people often most in need, we're taking the people that are the highest performers. So to not welcome people who will really add to our culture, our economy, and everything like that is stupid on our part. I don't know what other arguments to give. I was the refugee officer for West Africa, representing the US government, and based in Abidjan and Cote d'Ivoire. And I got Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, and he was chair of the House Judiciary Committee at the time, arch conservative from Wisconsin, everybody in the embassy was laughing because they knew how liberal and progressive I was, and I was stuck with this very conservative congressman. They were wondering if we were even going to survive the trip together. And we bounced around African roads for 2 weeks, going to refugee camps all over Guinea and Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia and Sierra Leone and all this kind of stuff. And he was horrified because I took him to camps that had 30,000, 40,000 refugees in them. And he was horrified, and he said, how are we going to keep these people from coming to the United States? And I said, the answer is simple, because it really is simple. Take care of them where they are. And you talk about these camps like in Brindisi and things like that, they're terrible. Nobody's going to stay in those kinds of camps. If we had camps that had education, had employment opportunities, had a decent quality of life, people would stay there for a while. At least, but a lot of these camps are underfunded. The Poor United Nations goes around and asks for donations from countries. They don't get the money they need, and so of course the camps are bad, and they're not up to snuff. Edafe's story is inspiring, and he's absolutely right. We should stop reacting to Donald Trump's tweets and do some volunteer work in shelters and really help refugees. I want to tell one final story, and we do a lot of work with LGBT refugees and asylum seekers. And there was another Nigerian. He was 19 years old. He wound up with a stepfather that caught him in bed with his boyfriend, and the stepfather tried to kill him several times. This guy was a jerk. He was kind of a universal jerk. He was also beating his mother and his 2 sisters, so they escaped and they went to Canada. And they sent some money for this young Nigerian boy to get a fake passport and a fake American visa. And he wound up at JFK Airport, and immigration said, you have a fake visa and a fake passport. And he said, yes, I'm escaping, I'm fleeing for my life. And so they put him in detention in Newark, same place that they put Edafe. And eventually he was released, a social worker, and it was actually a family at the Montclair UU congregation that gave him a place to live because he needed an address because they didn't want to just release a 19-year-old boy on the streets of Newark, New Jersey. And so that got him out of that detention center. We also organized for him to get a pro bono attorney, and it was interesting. So I was there to testify as the expert witness, and I like to touch wood here. Every time I've testified in a case for asylum, they've gotten the asylum, so I have a pretty good record so far, so I hope I can keep that up. So he arrives with this other guy, and his attorney says, who is this guy? He said, he's a friend. What kind of friend? Oh, friend. Is this your boyfriend? Yes. And then he goes to the boyfriend and he says, where are you from? He says, I'm from Ghana. He said, are you also applying for asylum? He said, yes. And he said, don't you realize that you can testify in each other's behalf? And what happens with LGBT asylum seekers is that they've spent their entire lives hiding their sexual orientation or gender identity. The last thing they want to tell anybody is that they're gay or they're lesbian or they're bisexual or they're transgender. They do not want to divulge that information. And all of a sudden they have to go into a court in front of an administrative judge and prove their sexual orientation in order to have grounds for asylum. And it's a very hard psychological switch to do all of a sudden. And this young Nigerian boy was not prepared to do that. He was very afraid, even talking to his own attorney and me that was there to testify on his behalf. So he's still here. He's still in limbo. It's been about 3 years. Basically, the U.S. government it says, yes, he does have a well-founded fear for persecution, but they're alleging fraud, that he arrived on a false passport with a false visa, and he never really pretended as if it was real, but that's the issue that he's still fighting. So anyway, this is something that we work very much on. I'm very happy with this panel. We've had these panels in the past. We had a seminar on immigration and migration migration. And we just had a conversation today with Reverend Carlos and with George to try to build a real partnership with this congregation to really work on these issues together, the UUUNO and this congregation. And we're hoping that together we can really multiply our efforts and really do something important. There are many things that people can do, as your panelists here were saying, to help people in these kinds of situations. First of all, just to be a friend, to be a friendly face that is not coming down on them or calling them names or something like that. Helping them find jobs, helping them find pro bono legal help, helping them through the process. All these things, helping them find housing. Housing, of course, is critical. So there are many things we can do. Even in the past, we've asked people to give asylum seekers Metro cards, because they've got to go to doctor's appointments, they have lawyers' appointments, they've got things they've got to do, and if all you do is give them a $20 Metro card, that helps a lot. So, and winters are cold, it doesn't feel that way now, but winters are cold here in New York, and most of these people, like Edafe, they come from very warm countries, and winters here, how are you doing with the winters here?
It was the first official winter.
You survived. So, having winter clothing for a lot of these refugees and asylum seekers can be very, very helpful. So, yes?
Was the moderator an asylum seeker as well? Or,
were you an asylum seeker?
No, I come from a refugee family too. I myself was born here. I just happened to live abroad. My mother actually escaped the Lebanese civil war. Her own mother was killed during that war, so she then escaped from Lebanon to the US. And my father's family are refugees from Palestine. They were forced to leave their homes in Palestine and come to Jordan. So both sides of my family are refugees, but I was born here.
Rani is an intern at the UUUNO. He's a student at Hunter College. And we have a really wonderful internship program. Elaine Congress is here from Fordham University. She usually gives us some interns. And the discussion we had today with Reverend Carlos and with George is maybe having one of our interns actually work in this congregation and be a kind of a liaison between our office and the work that this congregation is doing. So we're brainstorming, and any ideas that you may have to make this partnership really vital and work, we're open to those ideas. I also want to recognize that Greg Lee is here from TECO, from the Taipei Economic. I just call you the Taiwan Embassy, but I know I'm not supposed to say that. But a great friend, and really does, even though Taiwan does not have member state status of the United Nations, they're very good UN partners. They have a lot of events at TECO on the rights of indigenous peoples, on the rights of women. They actually are doing a great job of fulfilling the Sustainable Development Goals, even though they're not an official member state of the UN, which is a sad story. But anyway, thank you very much, Greg, for coming. And Elaine, and for everybody, thank you. Bruce for coming. I love Bruce because we have the same name, and he's a great guy, so thank you.
Like if people think that, if you think you can't do anything, one of the easiest things you can do is to use your social media to educate people, because you have a lot of followers on social media. Like just posting things that are not politically aggressive, or I'm no longer on Facebook because I can't fight anymore. But you could just post some things that will put people into the mindset of thinking about humanity. I feel it will go a long way towards educating people.
And buy his book.
Could I just mention one sort of happy story to end on? It sort of has a happy ending. I'll tell it briefly. So some of you, I don't know how many of you read The Guardian regularly, but they did an expose about the British Home Secretary. I think her name is Angela Rudd. She was forced to resign in a scandal because it turns out that she lied to Parliament about this whole Windrush immigration situation, where the Home Office, which is the British Cabinet office that's in charge of immigration, and the Home Secretary is one of the 3 or 4 top members of the British cabinet, was routinely deporting pretty significant numbers of immigrants who had the legal right under British law to stay. And most of them were Afro-Caribbean, people of color. And the Home Office was deporting them even though they had some legal basis to stay. And thanks to the Guardian that did this expose, the Home Secretary was forced to resign in disgrace. So even though so many families were, affected negatively by this, the happy ending was, in this situation at least, there was some modicum of accountability, so that the British Cabinet Minister, the Home Secretary, who was responsible for this disgraceful situation, was forced to resign. Now, this actually all really started under Theresa May, who's still Prime Minister, but she won't be there for very long. As soon as Brexit's negotiated, she's out the door. So I call her Theresa May resign. But in any case, I thought it would be nice to end on a somewhat happy note that occasionally there is a modicum of justice and accountability and progress when it comes to immigration and refugee issues.
Thank you. We take all your viewpoints and experiences into high value. Don't forget to buy book Bed 26. I'd like to thank Mr. Bruce Knotts, Edafe Okporo, Somia, Elrowmeim, Pauline Park, and Henia, Dakkak, and thank you all for showing up tonight.